So, welcome to the Lunar Herbal Alchemy Guild. I'm thrilled to launch this as herbs and lunar cycles and alchemy have been things that I've really resonated with me, but to combine it into something is powerful and alchemical in and of itself. And I wanted to just at this first gathering spend some time, unpacking what does this even mean? So we have Lunar Herbal Alchemy Guild, right? And I want to focus first on the idea of what is alchemy. And in the Goddess course, I talked a little bit about it. As you know, we often it comes up, or the word alchemy is most relevant. I'll share my screen here with a picture that I think might resonate. Let's find it. Here we go. It's so bright out. Here we go. Okay, so this is what came to mind for me when I was first thinking, what is alchemy? And then, you hear about these guys in underground laboratories laboratories, just their own study. It was their own life study. They were a little bit crazy. Some people called them frauds, and they were in this idea of raising lead to gold is one of the ways that, I think we think about it. Also, there's known that the philosopher's stone was one of the things that they said that they used, and not only for raising lead to gold. If you had the philosopher's stone, you could do this. You could make this magic happen, raise heavy metals to gold. You could heal people. And so it was very, we think about it in this kind of Renaissance way, and very male-centered. It was always a guy with another bunch of guys, because that was just the nature of society. If we look a little bit deeper, and I'm going to do a reading, I'm going to read something for you guys. There's kind of this, it goes back further than that. And because it's not able to be proved, it kind of goes into a fad, and people try to say that they're alchemists. And then it kind of, the true magic makers also meet with, some of the people who aren't actually doing anything. And so it's interesting that it's coming up now, because we just talked in the Goddess gathering about, one of the main themes for 2021 is going to be using our energetic sensors to sense truth. Mm-hmm. And when I heard the word alchemy, I had no doubt that it was real. Let's stop the share and all. So alchemy, though, they communicated with symbols. They communicated with codes and symbols. And I actually, it's funny, in the Los Altos library, you guys, some of you who are joining might know that I used to, during COVID, park in the Los Altos library parking lot and do a lot of my broadcasts from there. But actually, in the Los Altos library, they had a Rosicrucian manual. And so this image that I've shared, and there was hardly any, which of course I checked out many times, because I was just like, what's this about? There was hardly any words. There were no instructions. There were all these things like this, where there were all just these pictures. And the idea here is that they were speaking in a code. The code was symbols, kind of like the energy of witch hunts. They kind of wanted to keep this powerful information in the in the right hands. It reminds me a lot of, when Reiki was first taught, when it became a thing, it was in a Japanese monastery. It was all men. It was closed doors. It was a very small kind of sect of people who were doing this practice. And when we are coming into times where I believe, we're all waking up to the magical creatures that we are. And alchemy is kind of a nice, we're going to use it in a broader term. But so they use symbols to kind of show that those who knew what the symbols meant would be able to look at a picture and be able to see, what the communication was here. And this is a cool one, because this is, the man standing on the sun, the woman's standing on the moon. I have to admit, it's so sunny here. I have to hold my hand up. They've got this Rosicrucian cross. There's a dove. There's all these ways that they're talking about I see it as actually they're talking about a polarity, and we'll get to that in a second, where they're talking about the needing of balancing of energies. So let's go to the next share. So one of the main things that they were, when we think about alchemy, I mentioned they were interested in raising lead to gold. Gold has been one of those things for many millennia that has been both, people have abused power to get it, and it's a very sacred thing. So we think of gold, and obviously it means wealth, it means money in the 3D world, but in the Aztec times, gold was the same thing as water, as corn, as salt, as rice. It was a commodity that was necessary, and they would cover their whole body with gold dust to somehow communicate with the sun. And gold was, even in the spiritual ways, it's the only thing that doesn't tarnish. So alchemists were interested, true alchemists, they would say, were interested in gold for its metaphysical, spiritual properties, not in amassing wealth. And so today, where we might find the idea of alchemy, also I mentioned Rosicrucian, Rosicrucian groups are alive and well. There is an Egyptian museum in San Jose that I've gone to a couple times that's actually owned by the Rosicrucian, a Rosicrucian group. And it's interesting the way they've set up the whole perimeter. They're running energy through the land, and they're also using Egyptian, there's actually a statue of Ma'at, and there's a couple places where you can feel that they're using symbols to alchemize even the energy of what's happening in San Jose. So it's alive and well in modern times, but it's kind of under the radar. And it's another ways that word that we associate with it would be like Hermetic traditions. But it's all kind of fringe, and some of it it's questionable whether or not it's real. It's very reasonable to question whether or not everything that we come across as alchemy would be real. But that is also along the lines of, there can be, real and not real energy healers. There can be, it kind of reminds me of like good cop, good lawyer, bad lawyer, good doctor, bad doctor. They're all, it's the integrity of the person, right? So an alchemist is a person who's working with magic and spirit, and that is a realm that the three-dimensional world can't wrap its mind around. And I want to read to you guys next something from Terence McKenna, who, I've never really gotten into psychedelic drugs for self-realization, but there is a camp of people who do that, and that's perfectly fine. He was a champion of kind of being able to use plant medicine and also things like LSD to be able to have these visions was one of the things he did. But he also studied alchemy, and he studied a couple things that were quite fringe. And he came to Esalen. Esalen Institute is in the Big Sur area of Northern California. And in 1991, he gave a talk on alchemy. And I thought it was interesting. I pulled up this talk, and I wanted to read from it so that we can kind of, bear with me for a second, but it's going to lead us to where we're headed next. So let me pull up my email. I just prepared. Oh my gosh. You would think that I actually don't need glasses. It's just that it's so bright and my computer screen is not quite that clean that I need to see what's going on. Okay, give me 1 second. So I'm going to read to you from what he has to say about what alchemy is, or just, and it's going to kind of set the stage for the thing we're going to do next. So just a second while it loads. Okay, so this is from, he was at Esalen in May 1991. And he says, in the Hermetic, he's talking about Hermetic literature, because the Hermetic tradition was one of the, kind of like the Rosicrucians, they alchemized things. So in the Hermetic tradition, there is a prophecy, and the prophecy is that a day will come when men will no longer care for the earth, and that on that day, the gods will depart and everything will be thrown into primal chaos. This prophecy was very strongly in the minds of the strains of the non-Christian thought, and it evolved at the close of the Roman Empire. When you look back into historical time, it's when you look at the 1st and 2nd centuries after Christ that you reach a world whose psychology was very much like the psychology of our own time. It was a psychology of despair and exhaustion. This is because Greek science, which had evolved under the aegis of Democritian atomism and Platonic metaphysics, had essentially come to a dead end in those centuries. We can debate the reasons why this happened. An obvious suggestion would be that it's because they failed to develop an experimental method, and so everything just dissolved into competing schools of philosophical speculation, and a profound pessimism spread through the Hellenistic world. Out of that pessimism, and in the context of that kind of universal despair, which attends the dissolution of great empires, a literature was created from the 1st to 4th centuries after Christ, which we call the Hermetic corpus, or in some cases, trismegistic hymns. So the Hermetic corpus, McKenna says, I'm going to keep reading just one more paragraph here. The Hermetic corpus is the most poetic and cleanly expressed outpouring of ancient knowledge that we possess. But it was reworked in the hands of these late Hellenistic peoples. It is essentially a religion of the redemption of the earth through magic. So that's interesting, and I'm going to pause my reading of him here. It's kind of like, at that point, the people who knew about magic culled all that knowledge and put it into this book. That's what McKenna is suggesting. And it's interesting that he's talking about, redemption. When I read religion of redemption of the earth through magic, like all the hairs on my body stood up. I was like, what? That's what they did. So it's kind of interesting. So I'm gonna keep quoting McKenna here just for a little bit longer. So science has exhausted itself and become mere techne. It is still able to perform its magical tricks, but has no claim on a metaphysic with any meaning, because the program of rational understanding that was pursued by science has pushed so deeply into the phenomenon of nature that the internal contradictions of method are now exposed for all to see. In discussing alchemy, we will meet with the concept of the coincidenta oppositorum, the unity of opposites. This is an idea that is completely alien to science. It's the idea that nothing can be understood unless it's simultaneously viewed as both being what it is and what it is not. It is an alchemical symbolism that we will meet again and again, symbolic expression of the coincidenta oppositorum. So pause here for one more. When I read that, I've talked a lot about 3D versus 4D versus 5D as one, kind of collective lens we can look at this transition. And the 3D is this physical world, and he's kind of talking about science is in the 3D world. You have to, it's not true unless it's proven, and unless it's proven, then who knows if it exists, and magic is this whole other realm, as all of you guys well know. I was like, no, we pull things into reality before they exist. So, but then 4D is, I think, where it's interesting to kind of consider, because that's kind of a lot of what 2021 is going to be. 4D is this astral world. It's light and dark. It's both. It's where it's kind of like, I often think of it as like a training ground, or this kind of remembering that we're doing when we're able to, get out of the world of only physical and fear and move into this kind of dualistic neutral space of light expands, dark expands. And so he's kind of alluding to that when he's talking. So 2 more sentences here from McKenna. So it may be in the form of a hermaphrodite, which is, I don't have that symbol, but I can share it with you guys at some point. It may be in the form of the union of Sol and Luna, which is what we saw in that symbol that I shared with you just a little bit ago. It may be in the form of the union of Mercury with lead or with sulfur. In other words, alchemical thinking is thinking that is always antithetical, always holds the possibility that by a mere shift in perspective, its opposite premise will gain power and come into focus. So that's cool, because I think that it kind of is just pointing to say that, in my mind, I would like to offer now that alchemy is real. And I'll get to why. Oh, I want to share one more thing that McKenna shared with. Let me share my screen. This is pretty, I actually don't quite know where this sourced from, other than McKenna used it in his presentation. So it's the alchemical table of symbols. And it's interesting because to me, it looks very much like a periodic table, right? If we look down at the bottom left, you see the elements, which is, many of us know that, earth, water, air, and fire, but also look at the second from the bottom, zodiac signs and processes. And so these symbols, the alchemists are looking at the energy of the zodiac sign as energy that they worked with. And we all kind of likely know, if anybody who's attracted to any, it's not even my line of work, but this is, we kind of understand, if you're into astrology, you get that the planets are influencing our Earth, and we have the chance to kind of work with their energy. So I love that that's in the alchemical table of symbols. And if you look up to what looks more like the periodic table, you kind of see right in the middle, there's a circle with a dot in the middle. That's also an astrological symbol for the sun. Above that is the moon. And so the sun is gold, the luna is silver, and then right above that, that's Venus, that's copper. So you can kind of see some of these, we already know what they mean. And I think there's probably several to many layers as to what these symbols would mean. It reminds me very much of like a Egyptian hieroglyph kind of, that's how my mind meets it, is like, what is that saying? So I think that McKenna is a cool jumping off point for us to, I want to take a second for us to see what oh my gosh, I can do this. Just a second, guys. I want us to sit for a little bit. I want to offer, my version of alchemy. And it's really kind of, as with everything, that it's just going to be a personal journey of what does that word mean to me and why am I attracted to it? So, I sense that alchemy, involves an understanding of the natural world, so that gets us to the Lunar Herbal Alchemy Guild, because we are going to be working with the plant kingdom. We're going to be working with and remembering, every month will be one or maybe two plants that we're really going to be meeting and ingesting and, being able to experience them topically and internally, and getting to know the personality of that plant. So the understanding of the natural world, I think, is necessary for what we might term alchemy. And the natural world extends, of course, far beyond the plant kingdom. We also have, the elements, earth, water, wind, and fire. There's so much in the natural world, but really it means kind of seeing everything as having its energy and having its intelligence and having its power. And also working with the spiritual world, that's kind of the world of magic. And, we talk a lot about, in the goddess course, we met a lot of goddesses. In the podcast, I talk a lot about different avatars and the energy of a certain type of guide or consciousness that we can tap into to create. I also think of alchemy as our own consciousness. And I talk a lot in the podcast about the power of our consciousness. So there's that litmus test of the truth of our intention and the truth of what we want to create, and the power of our consciousness in focusing and wanting to alchemize. And alchemize really means, I mentioned the philosopher's stone, which may or may not exist. I think it's kind of irrelevant in the sense that, we're looking for transmutation and transformation ultimately. And, things that happen in magical ways. And for me, that means healing. And, healing is another way of just thinking about, what do I want to change within myself, within my life, within my world. And so alchemy, I think, is another lens to dive into, kind of like if you studied Wicca for a year fully on, what would that be like, or if you studied Reiki for a year, or so alchemy to me is, I like it because it seems like it's a pretty broad umbrella that a lot of things can fall under. It's a pretty general term. We don't have to have it be that we know the definition of alchemy, but I think to me, healing and magic and are the two words that I would like to offer for our journey together. And then also, I really am excited to explore and see what comes up about, it's like when we go back to Egypt, what do we learn and what did we know? And to step into alchemy as who we are today, even if we've already dipped our toe. I know I have for many years. I'm thrilled to be myself today and be like, I wonder what's going to come through about how we're going to be able to use um, that body of knowledge. And we're going to, maybe unpack that hermetic corpus a little bit when it is pertinent. This, I kind of wanted to just do a presentation of what is this, somebody said, okay, I trust you. And I would do, but what are you doing? So I thought, well, let's just spend this first time really kind of setting an intention for, and I kind of want to encourage everybody who's live and everybody who watches this afterwards to think about what alchemy means for you. And then, so I mentioned it's a Lunar Herbal Alchemy Guild. So we're going to be working with Luna. We're going to be, starting a new herb and starting a new theme every new moon, because it's seeding time. And we're going to walk it through the fruition of the full moon and into the release and let go time. And then we're going to do it again. So that's the lunar cycle magic. And then we're going to work with the magic of the plant kingdoms. And then the guild, I think it's great because that just means, to me, a group of like-minded people who, appreciate gathering in community and want to see what comes up. So that's kind of my short introductory presentation. I don't know if anybody who's here now wants to share what alchemy might mean for them. It's not necessary, but I kind of wanted to, if anybody wants to, you're totally welcome to. No? Okay. So then let's think about, like I said, you may or may not have gotten your herbs by this recording, but you'll get them in the next couple of days. Our herb that we're going to be working with this cycle is calendula. And it's funny, it kind of surprised me. I thought it was going to be something totally different. I thought that was going to be more of a solar summer herb. But then when I really got into the healing properties of calendula, and I did it my first, as I was mailing you guys stuff, I started working with the tea, and I realized how much I needed this plant right now. It's a very good plant for winter as well as summer. It does have that solar pop, but it's also so soothing. And in the winter, in the challenge, it brings this knowledge of spring. So I think that is its own kind of magic making, and it also is so good for our GI. It has antifungal, anti-cancer properties. There's I will add more material. I forgot to add. There's some cool recipes. I gave you a meditation for the tea and a practice that I call alchemy with the tea, and that is very much just an energetic healing intention practice working with the plant. And what I visioned us doing, just with this 1 month, kind of like we're in a little personal learning, let's see what happens for us with this plant, and know that, now we're going to know this plant and have it in our repertoire forever now, because calendula and us are going to, and I recommend, I say this in one of the videos, first just start with simple calendula, get to know the effect of just that flower, and then there's neat ways to add it to kitchen stuff, to make another version of a tea that you can do other things with. Also put a disclaimer of, it's highly unlikely that somebody's allergic to calendula, but if you are super allergic to chamomile, then you might want to make sure you're not allergic to it. That's just for a couple folks who I don't think that's going to happen. But so I want us to kind of see what comes through for an intention setting, because we're around the time of the new moon. And this is a transformational new moon that is showing us that we are on a long journey to rebuild the structure of our bodies, to rebuild the structure of our lives, to rebuild the structure of our world. And it'll be interesting to see what this plant, calendula, has to show us. I think it's going to have some very soothing properties for us. You guys see me still? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. So what is an intention that we might set when we're going to be working with this? And calendula is also very protective. So it's an interesting healing, protective, abundance bringing plant. Do any of those words resonate? Which one of those words resonates? Healing definitely resonates for me. I'm always open to the ways that the plant kingdom can nourish my physical body because I'm a human being. And also just general healing. I found it so soothing to drink this drink during those moments where my mind was in that shift. The drink really helped me. And then protection in the sense that I imagine it is almost like a golden shield. It's almost like it goes into our the alchemical practice. I talk about how it's going to scan your field, but I also see it almost as like providing like a golden little shield of protection around our whole field, which I am also interested in receiving that this month because dark's expanding and light's expanding. So I know for myself that I'm not ignorant of the dark, but I also don't need to spend any more time than I need to learning those processes. So if this plant's meant to protect me, that's great too. And then abundance, I think a lot of us, as we're seeking, we're feeling called to new directions and new projects, and we're really wanting to birth ourselves, and we are getting these nudges of what's possible. What if it actually is true? And I know we all know on some level that the universe will give us, there's immense abundance for all of us. So I would like to invite us to also invite this plant to help us kind of take off some of those layers of the limitations that we might have around whether or not we're worthy to, if it's receive a lot of money, if it's have everything come to us, to have more than enough of food or anything, abundance in all of its forms. So I kind of like all three of those, but I just kind of want us to, as you're here with me now, or as you watch this later on today, whenever you watch this, just kind of sit and sense what aspects are resonating with you, for you.
Well, I've always been aware of calendula as a healing, but I had not ever considered, and I'm wondering about the other two properties that you discussed. Is that what you've learned, or is that what you feel, or what it's a sense? How did you come up with those? The protection and the abundance.
I think from a couple different directions. I wouldn't say Wicca, but I would say there are people who know, and you can connect. I remember when I used to sell stones at a farmer's market. At first I wondered if I was making it up, because you could hold a stone, and eventually I could hold a stone. I could know what it was going to do, and I didn't. And then you'd go and look at the gemstone book, and I was like, oh, actually that's pretty similar. So part of this is just kind of internal knowledge, and part of this is like, I'll talk to, my Reiki master about it, or somebody else, and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, no, that's actually, I bet you, I don't know what book there might, I bet you could find it in a book, but I think it's going to be more of a, so we're jumping off. Our jumping off point is herbalism, right? Because there's so much to be remembered when we think about just what a standard herbalist would know in terms of how it interacts with the physical body for physical health, right? But then herbalists and plant people will also tell you that the plant does way more than just something for the physical body. And I've known that because I've rescued plants. If you would have seen me 15 years ago at my yoga studio, I've loved plants my whole life. My grandma was a herbalist and gardener, but I had this huge garden, and whenever anybody had a sick plant, they brought it to me, and like I made the plant better. And it got to the point that I would even, there's a nursery in Palo Alto that has a guarantee on their plants that they guarantee the plants to live. So if the plant starts to look sick, they will put it in the dumpster to die. So I used to go rescue these plants, and like my yard is, if you look around here now, there's all these rescues, and you learn to talk to the plants and figure out what they can give you and what they're offering and what they're, so I guess I'm telling you, I don't quite have a concrete way, but also you get to see for yourself, see if an abundance seems obvious to me, because if you look at the language of that flower, it's so their each little part of that calendula plant, I talk about this in the material, their little florets, every little one of those leaves is actually a flower. So there's just all this, it's like sunflower type of a thing packed into one little tiny pop. So it reminds me of just continual giving, continual light coming through. The protection part, I think of it as protection, and I kind of, I might be able to add some stuff to the material. Well, this is the material. This will be on the Teachable website. It's not a protection as if, you know, people use hematite for protection. People use sage for protection. And the typical way for protection means there's a big heavy energy right here and I'm scared of it, so sage. You know what I mean? I think that this type of protection is kind of more, as I was talking about, what I see is like a golden shield around the orb that just almost kind of says, does not resonate. There's no need to like protect from heaviness, but maybe it's more of a protection in law of attraction, keeping us vibrant so that anything that might be lower that was in our astral before that we didn't even know was hanging out was going to try to come in is going to not come in. I think it's a different kind of protection. I think it's a more subtle and light filled protection, if that makes sense. Good questions. Did I answer those?
It's absolutely great. Exactly. I really opened my, I want to have a better, I know what my knowledge is limited. And so it's to the healing properties. Quite frankly, that's the only things I've ever thought of plants and herbs and things is really the balancing and healing aspect to what they have to offer. And then as far as flowers go, it was always just that that's really beautiful and I feel happy looking at it, or it has a fragrance and that's it. So I'm very grateful to you for sharing how I can be open to greater messages, I guess, or more of what the plant is about.
Yeah, and the nature of this work is interesting because it's kind of like as our third eye opens. I remember when I even set up my yurt. I have a plant that's been with me for 25 years. It's a potted plant, and it knows so much about me. And I use him as my he's like my big guy that comes in, and I can now sense when plants talk to each other. You can really start to imagine that every plant has its own intelligence. It's a living being, and the groups of plants. So, you know, calendula is one particular type of plant that we've named. Every calendula plant's going to be a little bit different, but they all are kind of like the same family. So they do the same thing, but they also are going to be very subtle in their unique nature. So I love thinking about plants, and I got into this when I started making flower essences, because when you make flower essences, you're picking the flower of the plant, and the idea with flower essences is that the plant only flowers. It's like you can only give birth if you're really stable, if your system's in a good space. So this plant is almost like giving birth. Here's its flower. Flower essence therapists, you know, we take you have to ask the plant though if you can take its flower. You can't just go grab its baby. You know, you have to say, is this offering for me? And so I started to get into communicating with plants, and very clearly sometimes the plant was like, no, not yours, go away, find somebody else, you know. And then the idea of flower essences is it's, you know, you put that out in a crystal bowl full of distilled water in the sunlight, and it's just that simple. It's not even a distillation process for essential oils, which, you know, I don't think we're going to talk about that in this course, but, you know, it's all energetic. It's the light of the sun and the water, and the flowers giving the information to the water. And then you somehow create a concoction with brandy in different concentrations that you ingest this flower essence. So when I got into making that, I'm going to wrap it up real quick, making those, I really started to realize how I wanted to explore the idea of communicating with plants, with the plant kingdom, and to bring it to a whole nother space. You know, when we walk into a space here, I'm out in this yard, there's a big old pine or fir tree. He's got to be like 200 or 300 years old. And I look at that tree and I can feel it's a he, I can feel his energy and his wisdom and his knowledge. And so I think we all are kind of, it's just another, almost a way of like opening our third eye and remembering how magical the world is and how, you know, we can communicate and experience. And I think that I like starting with a tea because it's, you know, as with even what is alchemy? Is it real? What does it mean to me? That's a very personal journey. And so we're going to have a very personal experience that we'll get to share with each other as time goes on, of like, what did I learn from this plant this month? You know, and each one of us is going to have our own unique ahas from right where our starting point is. And just because you might not even believe that you can talk to plants or you've never talked to plants doesn't mean, like, no one's more advanced here, and everybody's welcome also, because this is just, it's time. And if we're interested, it's a really magical thing to embark on. So yeah, thank you. Anybody else have anything to share?
Cool. I'm down. Let's do it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fun to, I know the two of you that are commenting have been through the goddess course, and there's a whole handful of you who haven't as well. So, but you know, when we think about magic making and stepping into the realm of that which has been potentially forgotten or we've become separated from, and I love, you know, that we're going to get to work with some ancient texts, work with some symbols in the materials. I talk about, well, it's interesting, Caitlin, so in the God, we were talking about the swastika and the antikarana in another gathering. And that's alchemy will tell you that's the flip side. That's the opposites, which is something that science doesn't consider, that, you know, it's only, there's one thing and it's true. And if you can prove it, then it's true. And alchemy is like, no way, Jose, like there's both all the time. And I love that it also points us, and Terence McKenna said this, he alluded to this, it's the power of our consciousness. It's where do we want to focus our consciousness? There's a polarity. So are we going heavy? Or are we going bright? And so I think all we really need, I would like to offer, what the most important thing we can bring to this journey is an open heart, you know, and a willingness to explore and to see what feels true for each of us, you know, and see what alchemy comes to mean, and what we get to know about calendula as a flower, you know. And, you know, I've always known about calendula, but even you get to know it a little bit more and a little bit more when I was a kid. I never knew it would be such a magical medicinal plant, you know. It was just pretty, and now we really get to experience it. And if anybody wants some seeds, I had the thought that I do have some calendula seeds. I wanted to get you the flowers, but reach out to me if you happen to want some seeds as well. So that's a whole other aside, but I'm glad you're down, and I'm glad that we're going to be on this journey together. And so we're going to be meeting around the new moon every cycle. There's just about 4 modules per cycle. And so it's going to be pretty easy structure. We're going to talk about the plant in one of the modules. We're going to do a tea ceremony, or, you know, I'll offer that. And then also an alchemical practice. And then we'll have some kind of an intro video, and then this gathering. I'm also it won't be today when you get the content, but going to add some of the other calendula recipes, because I have to tell you, with calendula, I think it tastes good, and it's really fun to throw into salads and soups and things like that. It's an amazing just culinary herb in general, but we're going to take it from a magical perspective, and a really learning. So then maybe even also make some notes, and we can plan to share with each other at the next cycle as to what this really meant for us. And as always, feel free to reach out to me if there's anything that comes up, if there's anything that you have a question about. I will also add, I'm just realizing as I add the recipes, I'm going to add a way for you in case you want to make a solve. If you didn't get a solve from me, I'll just put a quick little note as to how to make one of those, so you can do a topical calendula experience. It's super good. I mean, that's what I think, Lucia, you were alluding to, the healing properties of it. So
I've been taking calendula baths.
Yes,
Uh,
yes, yes. There is a practice. It's Aztec, I believe. It's a flower bathing ceremony. As we get a little bit further into it, I had the idea to invite us to concoct our own, but I kind of wanted us. We're kind of jumping off simple here, because I think that there's enough here, but we're going to be adding a couple more things every cycle to just get our tool. I think of it almost as like a psychic toolkit, or just a magic making repertoire of what do we know and what do we believe and what can we use to create healing in our world. So
Totally.
thank you guys.
Yeah.
This video is going to be in the course. There's actually going to be a section that you can go watch this video in Teachable. So I'm going to actually upload it to the Teachable website so that you guys have it that place there. All right.
Cool.
Okay. Thank you guys. Tons of love. And I will chat with you soon. Yay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.